Hello, my name is Conroy, and this is a panel discussion, and it is titled "Embracing the Duality: Black Identity in a mixed heritage perspective." And today we're going to be talking about, our experiences being Afro Indigenous. Now we have three guests today. They're going to each be giving us their perspective based on some questions that we'll be asking. And I think that it's really important that we start really engaging in our mixed cultures and being proud of it, because there's many of us who are Afro Indigenous, and there's many of you out there that want to hear our story, so it can help you through the day and through your life, and also maybe help you with your youth to help them to understand what it feels like. So first, I'm going to start playing kind of like an anthem song. Of course, it's Marvin Gaye.
Nice.
To bring some love here today. We don't need to escape. War not the answer. Only love. You know we got to find a way to bring some love here today. Make it silent. Don't punish me with brutality. Talk to me so you can see what's going on. What's going on? Yeah, what's going on?
Okay, there we go. So, my name is Conroy Opie. I'm the host of Embracing the Duality: Black Identity in a Mixed Heritage Perspective. We have three guests with us today. And I would first like to start off with land acknowledgement. Since it's Treaty 4 status Indian, I'm a guest in this territory, Treaty 7. I love this area, so I'm very proud to be here, and I'm honored to be allowed to be a guest. So in the spirit of respect for reciprocity and truth, we honor and acknowledge the Mokisis and traditional Treaty 7. If I've said it wrong, please forgive me. Treaty 7 territory and the oral practices of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kanai, Pekani, as well as the Lyra, Nakota, and Tutsina nations. We acknowledge that this territory is home to the Métis government of the Métis Nation within Alberta District. Finally, we acknowledge all nations, Indigenous and non, who live and work and play on this land, and we honor and celebrate this territory. And first, we'll go with Autumn Eagle Speaker. She's going to give herself a quick introduction. Autumn, you there?
Frozen? I think she's frozen.
Okay, 1 second.
What happened to my internet? Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, we got you now.
Are you
You're
there?
frozen a little bit. You're frozen, but we're here.
Okay. Am I still frozen?
No. Oh, a little bit.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
At least she freezes in a good way. Like
This is true. Sometimes they're pretty
The
epic.
screens went black, so I don't know if that's a good sign or a bad sign. But I think I'll just talk. Okay. Okay, ni dana ka utskri big selfie ni dokti do ano mokinsis. Ngainoa First Nation. Hello, everybody. My name is Bluebird Woman. I'm from Calgary, by way of Gaina First Nation, otherwise known as the Blood Tribe. I was born and raised in Washington. I am of mixed heritage. My mom is a proud Blackfoot woman, and my dad is a proud mixed African American man. And they met in the 70s at the Friendship Center in Seattle and fell in love and made me and my brother. So I've been living in Calgary now for about 28 years. Um, and I have 6 children, 2 turtles, and 1 dog. Oh, and I'm also, I guess I run a business with my sister called Authentically Indigenous Craft Market. We create opportunities for Indigenous artisans to showcase and sell their goods. We've been in business since 2015, and we are Alberta's first inaugural Indigenous craft marketplace. And that's just a little bit about me.
Thank you so much, Autumn. We'll go with Samantha next.
Oh, that's me. It's Samantha Wilson. I am from San Antonio, Texas. I've been here in Saskatchewan and Regina since I was 4 or 5 years old. I'm Air Force baby. My dad's Air Force. My parents met in Minot. My mommy did not want to stay in Texas, so she brought us all back here. That's why we're here. Myself and my brother. I have 3 sons of my own, an ex-husband and a boyfriend. So there's that's about it. I am the Indigenous high school advisor for 2 high schools here in Regina. Oh, I'm Métis as well. I'm African American. Métis Canadian is what I like to, how I like to say it, because, you know, yeah, it had to flow some way.
Okay, excellent. Melreen?
Okay, Nuxaquanatanako, Marine Slurpatepui. I'm from the Kainai Nation as well as Autumn, better known as the Blood Tribe. I live here in Mohkinstsis, also known as Calgary. I'm a mother of 2. I am a Blackfoot and Creole mixed descent. My mother is a Blackfoot woman and Blackfeet from Browning, Montana. And I am the owner designer of Native Diva Creations, as well as a co-founder as the other portion of Authentically Indigenous. And I've been in Calgary most of my life. I was born in Seattle, Washington, moved here when I was very little, but Calgary is very, very much home for me. And I can't list all of my animals because I have a zoo, basically. So, but other than that, that's just a quick snippet of me.
Okay. So this is my first time being a host, so I usually I'm supposed to like introduce myself at first, but how awesome you guys are, I just kind of forgot. So here we go. So for me, I'm Conroy Obi. I'm from Treaty 4 territory, so I was born in Regina, Saskatchewan, and I'm from Piapot Nation, and I've been here for about 32 years. So I came here when I was 10 years old, and pretty much Alberta, Treaty 7 area is my home, and I truly love it here. I've also been running a business for the past 15 years, and for the past 3 years, I've been heavily engaged in youth mentorship and seeing how I can reach out to the community and start to change things. I have 4 daughters. Yes, 4 daughters. So it looks like I will be having more kids because I need a boy. So, and yeah, I'm very happy to be here today, enjoying everything. And thank you so much for joining us. And I'm honored, of course, because all of you are very important to our community. So I will start with the first question. So how has your Afro Indigenous heritage shaped your personal identity and sense of belonging?
Who would you like to go first?
Autumn. She frozen?
Okay. I probably frozen again. How has being Afro-Indigenous shaped your personal identity and sense of belonging? Okay. Good. I'm glad you can hear me at least. So being raised both Blackfoot and African American. I was raised simultaneously at the same time with both cultures. I grew up in Seattle in the Black community. I was raised in the Black community, um, my, and attended, Garfield High School, which is like one of the central high schools there. And, it was just like, you just seminal in my upbringing. And then in the summer times, my grandmother would pick us up, like a whole truckload full of like my brothers and me and my cousins, and then they drive us back to the reserve, and then we'd spend the summers being res kids, running around the reserve and swimming in the rivers and going to Sundance and learning everything, so kind of having both of those really really beautiful, rich cultures just showed me just how rich and diverse humanity really is. And I think by having both of them, my dad really ensured in us that we take pride in our cultural heritage, the fact that we are, First Nations. And when I was in Seattle going to school, there really weren't anybody that, really looked like me, and especially not a lot of Native kids. And so, it was really important for us to carry that heritage. And so I think because of that pride, that really helped me transform to who I am today, and to be able to, carry that pride on to my kids. Again.
I love that. Thank you so much, Autumn. And next we'll go with Samantha.
Okay. Question is, how is it shaped your personal identity into the community raised you? So I grew up here in Regina, and the community was very small. There was not a lot of Black people here in Regina.
Mm-hmm.
And Métis people, like my Canadian family, they're Desjardins. They weren't really actively Indigenous. I don't know how to say that. So there was no talking about it. There was no language or anything, right? So the Black community has always been very embracing here, but it was very small, the African American one. Over the years, our community got a fair bit bigger. They've always been very accepting, right? The Black community has always been very accepting here. It was the Métis community that was a little bit iffy. I don't blend in very well with both sides, right? So there was always this fine line of like, if I'm accepted or I'm not accepted. But so it made me stronger, right? All three of my boys are a little bit lighter than me. One of them is about my color, and he's got really curly hair, and he's been embraced very well within the community that he finds comfortable here, and that is he hangs out with a lot of Black kids, to be honest with you. So I hope that answered something. Did that answer anything?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Thank you so much, Samantha. Mm-hmm. And the star of the day, Mallory.
Well, I was really trying to think about this question, and I think a lot of it because personally, I don't really identify myself as an Afro Indigenous person, even though I am. I'm a little bit younger than Autumn, so our upbringing was a little bit different, and we do have different fathers, so that type of what was going on between us was completely different. My dad wasn't very much in my life at all, so I was really raised by my mom as a single mother and as a Blackfoot woman. And so I was raised really in this traditional Blackfoot Indigenous style of an upbringing. And to this day, when people ask me like, oh, what's your background? I say I'm Blackfoot. And that's usually kind of where it stops. And that's just it. Like I forget that this doesn't match this. So like I was raised in every part of my being. I feel I'm a Blackfoot woman. I'm aware that I'm a mixed person. But it's definitely made my upbringing different in the sense of I feel wholeheartedly a Blackfoot person, but I know I don't look it. And so that makes it a little bit more difficult within the Indigenous community to be identified as somebody that is the same way I feel. So growing up, going to school was a little difficult because people would ask me, what's your background? And a lot thought I was Latina or some sort of mix of some sort. And I was always like, oh, I'm Blackfoot, like I'm Native. And they're like, but your hair, I'm like, it's not a great perm. It really grows from me. Um, and so having to consistently prove my indigeneity was something that was a big part of my upbringing. That's one of the senses for me growing up. And for the person I am today, I'm still kind of connecting with the other side of my family, who I am, where we come from, our backgrounds, and what does that mean to me and for my children. And their dad is Cree, so they're quite a mix of things. And for them to understand what that looks like for them, and they look more Native than I do, and so it's a weird mix of things, but it's so beautiful because I get to really showcase my indigeneity within them and the upbringing that I had. That was quite a privilege to be submerged within ceremony and understanding what it is to be a Blackfoot person in this world. But it really kind of gave me this sense of, I guess, more pride, but also having to like really pursue in telling people who I am and convincing people all the time of who I am. So I think that being an Afro Indigenous person, it's made me really have to overthink things more than I would have if I wasn't. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Like as you guys were each telling your story, it made me think about, my own personal sense of belonging.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was growing up, I didn't even really realize that I was Black, because I was just all my cousins or crazy little Cree kids running around. My uncle would always take me out to the reserve, so I grew up around our people, and also going to ceremony, things like that. And the only way that I started to discover that I was Black was when I started hearing the N-bomb at school. And, at that point, my mother sat me down and, she had said, hey, you're Black. And at the time, I even had a little braid going on, and I said, no, I got a braid. Like, look. And then, she explained it to me. And, to be honest, as a little kid, I started crying because, I was confused. I'm like, no, I'm Native. And it's like, yes, you are, but you're also half Black. That's from Africa. And so in terms of the sense of belonging, our First Nations community is very especially when it's your close-knit family, they're very accepting, your blood. And that's that. But what I found too is outside of your family structure, you do face some prejudice and bigotry and things like that. But it feels so good when your grandmother and your grandfather, the way they embrace you. That's the strongest feeling of belonging. Because when that happens for us, you truly feel like you belong. And in terms of being Afro Indigenous, it can be a struggle because not a lot of people realize, it's either you have to pick one or the other. So if you look predominantly Black, you're identified as Black. And if you're like, no, I've been raised in, Native American ways, traditionally, that's the way I was raised. They're like, oh, come on, you're joking around, settle down. And then it's other people outside of the culture want to determine who we are and who we should say we are. And so I find that quite frustrating. But, over the years, it's been awesome to be really accepted. I also had an uncle who was prejudiced against me. He was older gentleman. In his 80s, and to be honest, I just never gave up. And his last 4 years before he passed away, we became really close, and he was really proud of me. He kind of separated me when we were kids all the time, but as he got older, things started to change. So, yeah. Now the next question I have is, can you share any challenges or advantages that you face navigating through the Afro and Indigenous heritage, in your professional settings, not only currently, but previously? And we'll start with Otto.
Okay. Just real quick, I wanted to, so my birth story, when I was in the hospital, you know, they have all the babies in the waiting room, and the people go see the babies that are sitting there. And I guess when my grandfather, my Blackfoot grandpa, went to go see me, uh, they said, "Oh, that's her over there," and they were pointing, and I was next to like a really dark black baby, and he was like, "Oh God, that's not hers," and they're like, "No, no, that's her, the light one," and he was like, "Oh, relief, relief," and I was just like, that's my origin story, you know, like my first moments of life, having that determinant where my grandfather was relieved that I didn't look dark, you know? And I guess just with you sharing that, I wanted to share that because, you know, I didn't, you know, there is racism on both sides and in our families. And, you know, it's something that I think I just am so used to now that I don't even notice it. But yeah, it has been a challenge. I think in the case of being like an Indigenous person in general, like when you're in school, you have to be like the Indigenous aficionado and know everything under the sun about what it is to be a Native person. And same thing with, I guess, being with being a Black person, is that people have this ongoing expectation that you're going to know everything. And for me, it kind of became a challenge where it's like, well, yeah. So my background in school was I took political science and Indigenous studies. And I, you know, became an expert in Indigenous studies, basically. And, you know, I really had to, I guess, echo what Maureen was saying was, you know, prove who I am and the legitimacy of my knowledge. Through my actions. And it's like I have to prove even harder than a normal person. I, in my past, where I was running like a girls' youth group, and it was for Indigenous girls at risk. And you know, one of the fathers found out that I was, you know, leading the group, and he was like, "Well, you know, she's half Black." And it's just like, it's crazy because, you know, the knowledge that I received was passed down from me, from my family and, you know, our knowledge keepers. And so it doesn't diminish anything that I know. It's just because of the color of my skin or who my being is that they look at me differently. And so I would say that because of that, being, you know, Indigenous and being American, there is that extra challenge of having to prove yourself and prove your worth. And, you know, in the States, I guess, like with me when I was younger, it's like drilled in that you have to work 2 times harder just to prove that you deserve to be in the room. And that's always kind of stayed with me. And there's truth in that, unfortunately. And so to be taken seriously, you know, you have to come like fully loaded all the time and just be prepared for everything. And I just don't let it faze me anymore. It used to really bother me when I was younger, but I think that's because I wasn't, you know, secure in myself and who I was in my younger age. You know, I am a seasoned chicken now. But you know, so I would just say that, yeah, it's been a little bit difficult, but, you know, you do what you can to navigate. And in my professional settings, because of the fact that I was raised mostly, you know, Blackfoot traditional by my mom, that I have gone that route where I've, you know, done Indigenous studies, focused work in Indigenous consultation, work for Indigenous companies, Indigenous Food Bank. Right now, you know, I was the chair of the Making Treaty 7 Cultural Society, you know, just trying to do what I can to uplift and help Indigenous people and give them more opportunity than what I had as a youth. Yeah.
It blew me away because I was just like thinking about so many things as you're talking about that in terms of like how that does feel. And, you know, and it is, you know, oddly like growing up, I kind of felt like I was the only person that felt like that, you know, that acknowledged some of those things and those feelings and emotions and things about being a mixed Indigenous person. And not knowing like, okay, like, you know, do I really show how Black I am? But I had nothing to go off of, right? So how old is this? pure Nietzsche all my life. So, yeah, that same question, we'll go with Samantha. Thank you so much, Autumn.
Yeah, Autumn, that was awesome. And I 100% agree. Like, what I've learned is when I walk into a room, I don't get to give the 80%, the 50%, like half of me. It's going in 120, 120% all the way. It's like there's no faltering on that. You have to go big or go home, like I said with my cup, right? Um, I'm forever trying to prove myself. The difference that I find I hang out with a lot of Indigenous people here in Regina, right? Um, and I do see that I am treated differently than they are. And I am Métis, so I'm already like what people would say a half breed, right? So um, people don't realize that they're talking to someone who is mixed when they speak to me. Like my old jobs, I've had that happen a few times, and the things that people say, it's very without knowing, right? And their comfort that they have. It's like the words that they would say about Indigenous people have been hurtful. And there was a lot of times that I didn't say anything back, right? That I didn't stand up for anything because I didn't know. I didn't know what to say. This is when I was much younger. I didn't know what to say or how to handle these words because I'm Métis and I never ever learned anything about my Métis side because we weren't supposed to. Like my Métis side was washed away many, many, many years ago. Um, so yes, there's been um, in the workplace, my previous jobs, there's been a big change in how people see me when I started talking more about my Métis side because it wasn't something I talked about all the time because I didn't know what to say. I didn't have any information. I don't have the history of it of my mummy's side. It was not until I got older and I started learning more about it. And then when I start talking about it, then people were like, "But you're not Métis, you're Black." And it's like, you know what? Yeah, it's like that's the thing. It's like, okay, so today I'll be Métis and then tomorrow I'll be Black. Is that okay? Because but I can't. So I stopped picking. I stopped picking years and years and years ago. Do you know how many people are mad about that too? Like you can't, you have to be one or the other. And it's like, no, I'm gonna be both. I'm gonna be both. Um, and there is a lot of justification. There's a lot of arguments. There's a lot of discussions, and there's a lot of I'm not racist. I have a Black friend, or I'm not racist. I have a Native friend, and like these little gross microaggressions that come with it, right? Like, but you navigate it. Just like my dad taught me that when we were younger, is you navigate it. So I used to get into a lot of fights when I was younger, and I can't do that when I'm old, right? So now I try to talk, and I'm okay enough that people can ask me questions and I can be kind about it. Like I'm not easily offended, but I tell you what, I can go sideways real quick if it goes that way. But I've had the older I got and the jobs that I have, people have been very, very kind to me. The whole basis of my job right now is Indigenous everything, right? Like everything I work with students who are learning about who they are. I'm working with students are who are looking for someone to be comfortable with. So, and that's me. I have a great job, and I've been very well accepted in the position that I'm in. So, yeah.
I like that. Melreen, come on, wow us.
I mean, I echo everything that's been said already for sure. I think there's been a lot of disadvantages just being a mixed person, not being one or the other enough of something that you're not be able to put in a category specifically for like a job opportunity, right? So like if it's something you need to look more this or you need to look more that. And the funny thing is, I'm one of those people that if I see something and someone tells me no, I kind of just go, okay, I'm gonna go around instead. I'm just gonna do it myself. So many jobs that have come up or opportunities, if it had to be, I wasn't quite Native enough or they had a phone call with me and then I saw them in person, they're like, oh, like didn't know I was Native, and that was always a thing. And I just started making my own jobs. I thought that was the best way to do it. If no one's going to do it for me, like, I will take it and do it. And I've just kind of gone through life that way the entire time. While I was in school trying to prove it consistently, I was always having fist fights, but it was with my own people because they didn't believe I was worthy enough. And outside influences didn't really care. So I was really lucky in the sense I was raised traditionally and within my culture, and I didn't have a shame of it. And like I went home and I knew, and I was out in the world and I knew who I was. But going into school, I didn't have a lot of Native friends growing up. A lot of my friends were every other ethnicity. And because they also had the same kind of issues, that we were relatable. So never mind that I was mixed within them. It's just we knew we were different. And that's what connected a lot of us. And so that's something that's kind of moved forward in life for me, is everybody that's been in my life is not just because of something or the other. All my friends have always been something different. So I've always been super open and welcoming to everybody and anybody. And I know that there's a consistent fight that I'm unfortunately going to have to fight within my own Indigenous community. That's something I face today as a designer. Saying that I'm a First Nations or I'm a Blackfoot designer, and then people see me, they're like, what? Like, it's always a question. Like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure. Like, I would know. And it's always questioning, well, what does this mean? And do you know what that means? Well, yeah. And then I have to explain it. So I think that's just going to be a part of life, which is unfortunate that we're always over explaining everything. We always have to have every answer possible. But I'm secure enough in it, just like Samantha, where I don't get offended. I let people ask questions. I always say I'd rather you ask me the most ignorant question and you walk away with the knowledge than to keep walking around ignorant, right? So if I'm that person, cool. Like, the more the merrier for information. But I think one benefit that I have found, which is, it's terrible, but I can get into spaces more as a mixed person than as a First Nations person. So I'm in a room, especially with like a corporate space, and it's accepted because they're not sure. So it's fine. I'm a person of color, so I'm the minority, that's fine. But once they learn that I'm First Nations, sometimes it's like, oh, well, we can't say you're that person from this space because you don't fit that mold for us. But you could be the BIPOC person on this thing. And I'm like, okay, like, so then I have to have this argument of why and where it comes from and how I identify and things like that and what that means to me. And sometimes I've left committees and boards and stuff because of that. But it can get me in the door, which can be helpful. But sometimes it can be harmful at the same time. So it's a catch-22. Like, I feel in the world, we're never going to win either way, but it's all about our outlook and our own pride in who we are that will keep us moving forward. Yeah.
Yes, I thank you so much, Melanie. In my professional settings, it's always been a challenge, because like growing up here in Calgary, of course you guys would know that was really white for a long time, especially in Saskatchewan as well. And then the past 10, 15 years, all of a sudden there's been an influx of people of color, coming here, working here, being in different professional, situations. And, like what I found was, everybody kind of wants that for me to get in the door, to do a quote or to do a presentation to get some contracts. I come in with some suave and they're like, oh, here's this suave brother. You know what I mean? And that is kind of like the stamp they put on me. But then when I start taking people out to lunch and stuff like that in groups, these clients, I make sure to mention, because I know at lunches, people start dropping jokes about Native people. And it happens quite often. And then you're sitting there and you're faced with like, okay, do I not say nothing? Because these are clients. Am I going to stir up the pot and possibly lose this contract? And you're like, okay, what do I do? What do I do here? And most times when you don't say something, you go home and you just kind of like die a little bit inside, because you've taken that microaggression and you just ate it. And one of the hard things about that is when you're raised in a traditionally First Nation home, especially, your grandmother and your grandfather and your mother. Like my mom was a single mom. She was very hard on me about being proud of who I am. So, like the first thing when I first started feeling those microaggressions in professional settings, I would hear my mom's voice like, "Don't you let them talk about you like that," And growing up in elementary, I was taught to go take care of it. But we're adults now, so we don't do those things. And, those are some of the disadvantages. Sometimes in business, you got to make a choice. Like, okay, they think I'm just Black. Should I just let them believe that and not mention that I'm also half Native? But then when we go to settings outside of those office spaces, I always say, hey, I'm not sure if you guys know, but I'm half Native. I figured some way to bring it up. And this way, they're not going to say any ignorant jokes. And for some reason, it seems to be Caucasian males that really bring it up during lunch meetings, for like out of nowhere. So as soon as we start, I'm like, hey, just so you guys know, I'm half Native. Just let you know. And I'm like, no, you're not, you're Black. And I'm like, no, I was raised Native. And I've had some clients that it was kind of like an ongoing joke for them. Oh, Conroy's Native, right? Right? Like some sort of joke. And so those are some of the disadvantages that I've faced is that, we kind of got to pick one side, but then we also have to deal with microaggressions. And the way that makes us feel as mixed people when we go home, horrible. And oddly enough, the advantages is that being raised First Nations was always taught to be proud. Proud of who I am. Reminded that we're resilient people. So, for instance, when it's time for me to find contracts, I'm out there every day. I show up at every office. I cold call. I email. I show up at your office like I'm there for an appointment so I can get to meet the owner. I don't business. But I get that from being raised multicultural because we have to be able to push through barriers. So I think that's one of the advantages of being of mixed heritage, that we can adapt better, but we're more adaptable to situations because we have to be, because we come from two different worlds. Yes. Was that deadly or what? Okay, the next question is what cultural traditions, one second. I had the wrong page there. What are some of the stereotypes and misconceptions about individuals of Afro Indigenous heritage that you've experienced or heard of in your personal and professional life? And we will start with Melreen.
Sure. I was trying to think about it. And you know what? Like, I think because when I come into a room, I demand the room letting them know that I'm a First Nations Blackfoot person. So to most, that is what I'm saying I am, and that's what I'm doing, and that's what I'm telling people is what you're going to expect, and that's the kind of narrative is going to come out of me. And I think the only thing I've ever really heard was like, I've just got mixed racial slurs more than anything else, especially growing up. But like in the way of things are today, I don't have too many, which is kind of nice, unless I just don't hear them. Because a lot of times things are happening when you're not in the room or when you've left the room because you've left this impression and now they're going off of what you've left behind. So yeah, I can't really say that I've had a lot, which is great. But I've I've heard just so many things of, oh, you're not enough of this and enough of that. And is mostly what I've come through most of my life, kind of going through things. Yeah.
We'll go with Autumn next. Thank you so much, Melreen.
Thanks. So I would say, like, the term Afro-Indigenous itself, like when people hear that, they think that automatically, like, you are Native, but you're from Africa too. That's one thing. And yes, we are from Africa, but through way of the United States, unfortunately, through that thing called slave trade, is how my family made it to the U.S. And so there's a lot of differences too in Canada between Black people from the States and Black people that are immigrated here in Canada from Africa. And so kind of fitting into in the Black community here is a little bit different. Because again, they have all this plethora of different cultures where they're coming from too, and we're different. We are different, and being an African American person, and so you're categorized differently, and you're kind of treated differently, and so that's kind of like a misconception. And then also too is that, well, I think automatically is that everybody thinks that if you're Afro-Indigenous, that number one, that you're going to look super like Afro-Indigenous, you're going to look Black, you're going to have an Afro, or, you're this, you're into that, and, I don't have either of those things. I should say I'm like the worst Native person too, because I don't gamble. I don't play bingo. I don't like hockey, so all of these different stereotypes, I don't fit into this box. I am this other creature completely. I am my own individual, and I am okay with that. But I would say, like, so, that idea of having to like prove yourself and prove your heritage. So when all of this stuff came around, with the Black Lives Matter movement that, happened, unfortunately, because of like Floyd George, I was asked here in Calgary through the community to speak at the rally as an Afro-Indigenous person. And I was so proud. And I would say it was probably one of my finest speeches, where I went there representing both sides of my family and held it up for my uncles and my father, and really just spoke from my heart and just shared a piece of myself. And at that time I was going through breast cancer. And so it was really emotional for me to be a part of that. But then what I saw online afterwards was the backlash from people from the Native community saying, I didn't even know she was Black. Who is she to think that she has a right to say anything? Who is she to get up there and talk like that? Who is she there to take so much space? And I have been privileged enough in my life now where I can call myself an activist. I've participated in community organizing to bring people together, to create rallies, to bring forward these issues that really need to be discussed and brought forward to attention. And so in that matter, I do reserve a little bit of respect for the amount of work that I did. I was part of instrumental in Idle No More here in Calgary, starting that. I was a huge part of walking with our sisters, and so for me, having that invitation to be part of the Black community was huge. And then at the other side, to have my own community tear me down by a fellow Blackfoot, I would say I was probably very jealous that they weren't asked to speak. But again, that's the kind of thing that we have to go through. And, it's just, and it's shameful. And I call it keyboard warriors, those people that are sitting online and have nothing better to do than to spew hate through their fingers that they would never be brave enough to say to your face. And, I'm just like, it's just something that you have to deal with. And then even with I'm still talking about the last question. So even with our craft market, authentically Indigenous, we have people, saying that, we're trying to be biased against people and not letting them participate in our markets, which is just crazy because, we're mixed ourselves. Like, why would we be biased against other people of other heritages? It doesn't make any sense. And so the obstacles that we've had to go through, people of their jealousy, of reaching out to go to the point of trying to get our funders to pull our funding, it makes me really sad that crab in the bucket mentality is so strong and so predominant in our community. And there's not enough opportunities to have these big conversations, to, discuss what's going on and have these opportunities like this to even uplift each other. And so, that's the one thing. I mean, I went off on a huge tangent and I forgot what I was saying now, but I mean, that's
okay.
that's about it.
I think that's something important to bring up. Is I find that in today's society, where it's like taboo to be proud of your heritage. There's no category on the forms we all fill out that says Afro Indigenous. You know what I mean? It says all these different things. But when you are proud of, like, I'm proud to be Indigenous, I'm proud to be African, I'm proud to be whatever it is, we're instantly called out. Like we're being prejudiced against others. We're not being inclusive. And for me, I have no problem with being proud to be Afro Indigenous. I have no problem supporting Black programs, programs, anything like that, and identifying with Black youth. I have no problem identifying with First Nations youth, and being proud of that and just solely focusing on that. And I think that that's not talked about enough. So thank you so much, Autumn, because we do need to have those kind of conversations. It's like, just because we're mixed doesn't mean that we need to be inclusive of we're having an Afro Indigenous market, right? We're kind of setting up like that, and then someone else like, oh, you're not being inclusive because you're not letting other people join. It's like, yeah, but it's okay. It's just, we're just a small little group, and we're doing our thing, and when you have your market, we're going to come and support you, just like you've come to support us. And so those kind of conversations, I think, are kind of taboo, but thank you so much, Autumn, for bringing that up, because I think that we do need to talk about those things. And in terms of like lateral violence, I think like there needs to be a broader conversation about how lateral violence affects our entire community. Because what we're doing is we're teaching the youth, hey, let's be divided over the smallest things. For instance, like you going to speak at a BLM event, oh, that's a good reason. Let's just attack her. Lateral violence, and those things need to be talked about, especially when it comes to Afro Indigenous, society. And we should have our own groups, our own shoes, FUBU, for us, by us, right? Okay, sorry about that, Samantha. The stage is yours.
I don't like being last. um, the validation of the fact that we've experienced some things. It's good. It's good sitting here with the four of us, to know that there's people out there who have experienced a lot of the things that I've experienced. Um, um, Sorry, I got thrown off. Yeah. Um, the changes that I've seen, a lot of changes since I've obviously aged, right? I've seen a lot of changes, but people are still quick to, what is that? People are still quick to bully me, and that's what I'm going to say. The word is, they're so quick to bully me that you can't be both. And I know I said this already, but I can't be both. It's like, okay, well, just you're getting picked on because you don't know what you're talking about. You're not getting picked on because you're Black. You're not getting picked on because you're Native. But really, the thing is that I am, because there's a lot of bullies out there. There's a lot of people out there who don't want to hear anything that I have to say, because people aren't good with uncomfortable conversations. And I'm here to tell people that it's okay to have that uncomfortable conversation. I know I'm different, homie. I know I am 100% different. I know I've created three little different boys too, and that's okay. Let's all coexist together. Let's just walk hand in hand, because that's what it is, right? Um, a misconception that I get all the time is that people automatically assume, okay, so you're Native. So what reserve are you from? I don't have one, right? I'm Métis. I don't have a reserve. The other misconception is, okay, so you're Métis because you're half Native, right? No, that's not it at all. So everyone assumes that Métis people are half Native and half white, or half Native and half something. It's like, that's not what Métis people are. So I get to educate, and that's the word I'm going to use. right? I get to educate. Sometimes people are not willing to learn. Some people don't want to learn, but I get to educate. And it helps because I'm changing. If I'm teaching one person that, then I'm changing one person and maybe they'll teach someone, right? That's how I try to see things. Um, I can bring a lot to the table, but at the same time, I get tired, right? I get really freaking tired of constantly being me. I said earlier that I have to give the 110, the 150%. And some days, you know what? I just want to sit here and I want to watch my housewives and I don't want to think. I don't want to think. I just want to just blend. I just want to blend. I know what I'm walking into the room as because I've been doing it for 50 years of my life, right? I know what I'm walking in the room as. It's just if I'm making a person uncomfortable now, I just no longer care. So people's people's misconception, I don't carry that on my shoulders anymore. I have been blessed to be invited into the Indigenous community here. Conroy, I actually hang out at Pie Pot a fair bit, and I love it because that was learning my Cree side, because that is what I am. Learning my Cree side has been amazing, and it's great on it's to my heart, right? It speaks to my heart. And I get to teach that to my boys. But people will ask me, "Well, what did you do in your ceremony today?" That's not my teaching to give you. "Oh, well, you're not a knowledge keeper. You're not a this, you're not a that. You can tell me." And it's just they're they're trying to take something that's not mine, right? So that's another misconception because I don't look like the people who I'm in ceremony with. I'm allowed to tell the secrets. I'm allowed to tell the things. I'm allowed to do the things, but I'm not, right? I'm just as, to myself, now I can say I'm just as Indigenous as the people I sit in ceremony with, right? And I can go to Black Lives Matter, uh, I want to call it a ceremony, a Black Lives Matter event, and I'm just as Black as the people there. So it's just, finding my balance has been a very, very hard thing to do, but I'm finally at this age finally balanced. I don't have more to give and I don't there's no more to take. No one gets anything from me. They get just this. This is it.
Thank you, Samantha. So I'm gonna throw like a curveball question out here. Since we're all parents, um, you know, what are some of the ways that you personally help your kids to deal with being of mixed culture? And so we'll start with Mallory.
Well, my children look very Indigenous. So they don't look mixed. They know that they are. They're aware of everything that makes them. And I have been so cautious of, well, not cautious, but like aware of how much I'm telling them of what their mixture is because it's a lot smaller than my mixture, right? Because I'm half Creole. And so that means they're only a little bit less than I am. So they're more First Nations than I am because their father is full Cree. So they're more Indigenous than I am. And they walk the world as Indigenous people, but they're very aware of the other side that makes them. And they unfortunately haven't had a lot of connection with that side. Like I said earlier, like I wasn't raised with my father around, and so I didn't have that cultural influence of what it is to be a Creole person, and to learn the language and eat the food and do all the things that I would love. And as I'm 37 now, my goal is that reconnection. So I want to bring my kids into that as I'm doing that myself. So I'll be making sure that they're aware even more deeply in the same sense that I will be knowing. So they don't, that they fortunately don't have to worry about the misconceptions and the bullying and the ignorance and racism in the same way I did. But as an Indigenous child, they face all the same things, just in a different form of being the only one in class, having to know all the things about being Indigenous, thinking that everyone's a pan-Indigenous and that they would know everything about every other Indigenous kind of person, and all of those things. And my son, he's 21, beautiful native man with a very long braid that he's had his entire life. And so he sticks out as an Indigenous man. He doesn't blend. And because of that, his pride that he has kept him through going in the world that is today. And so I think that the pride that I've instilled in my children with their indigeneity has really help form who they are today, and been able to fight against the backlash about the misconceptions, and but be able to showcase and enjoy and educate and participate in rallies and in ceremonies and powwows and all these amazing things that a lot of Indigenous people that they get to meet don't actually do. Being an urban Indigenous person is completely different than being a person on reserve. And so they've never really lived the life on res like I did growing up a bit and being there in summers like my sister did. But I think that it's a ongoing journey with my children. And, for me to tell my daughter, I was like, yeah, she has friends that are African American, and she tells them, yeah, I'm part Black too. And they look at her like, you're crazy, because she doesn't look African American at all. She doesn't look Latina at all. Or we have a mixture of French and Black and African American and Spanish. And there's a few Native American tribes. It's kind of a mix within the Creole culture. And so for her to say that she's a part of those things, people are always shocked by, because she doesn't look it. So she has the opposite effect of what I had, but it's still the same experience, which is so strange, right? Like, you would think that because she's passing as something specific, that it would be an easier journey, but it's still the same. Of her inner identity compared to her outer identity is so different. So I think it's just instilling that heritage and culture and keeping them aware of who they are helps build the people that they will become. So they're these people in the world that'll be like us. We're going to be out there telling people how proud we are of both sides that we are. And then we're not choosing one over the other, and we're proud of the people we are. So I think it starts from a very young age, to where my son's 21 and he's a proud man, knows that he's an Indigenous man, but he knows that he has this amazing mixed culture too.
Thank you, Mallory. Autumn, we'll hear from you.
Thank you. So I have, like I mentioned, I have 6 children and 1 stepdaughter. And so I've had, different stages in my life of having children. My oldest son is 26 years old, and he was an only child for 8 years. And then I had a set of twins and another one right afterwards. And then, ended up with the last 2 at the end, so my youngest are 7 and 8. And then I have a slew of teens. They're in the middle of 15, 16, 16, and my stepdaughter who's 18. So, when Willow, my oldest, was little, it was really important for me to take him to ceremonies, to participate, well, I guess all of them, actually, I should say that, but going to powwow and, getting them to dance in tiny tots, when he was 11 months old, when he won his first tiny tots dance competition. He was so cute, just dancing next to the drum as a little grass dancer, and so for me, it's that really participatory action with my kids and taking them out to really experience it. My current partner, and his family, they do like teepee poles. And, when you think about that, you're like, oh, it's a pole. There's so much labor that goes into the actual pole process, and going up into the mountains and, praying. And then you can hear my dog whining in the background. I'm really sorry. You could just, but just the way that you feel connecting to like your traditional roots by taking part in that, like I find nothing more invigorating than having a hatchet in my hand and slicing through a bunch of tree branches. That feeling, it's like an ancestral feeling, that connection. And, I'm passing that to my kids. And so all of my kids have come down to learn how to harvest teepee poles. What does that look like? What does it entail? And it's not just the part of you taking down the tree, it's, all the things that go to it. And then what happens afterwards. And then the prep, the sanding, the care, what you have to do. And then what else you have to do, to get the lining to make the home. And so teaching them that important thing about learning our structures and who we are is really important. And I found that, that my teens are like, oh, I don't want to go. And then we get out there and they're just alive. The mountain air is so good. And, I've always loved just being out in nature and on the land. And so I just really reconnect. And part of the other thing that we do is that we're privileged. I'm going to say this right now because I'm talking about this, and I realize that I have a lot of privilege being able to have both of my parents with their cultures, and my mom being so strong in her Blackfoot ways and her knowledge, and just that the fact that we come from knowledge keepers and medicine people. My grandmother, our late grandma Leona Eagle Speaker, people used to come to her all the time for, to get doctoring and to get cures, and she would make teas, and that was her thing. And, when we were little kids and we were always going out, with her and my aunties and my mom on the land and learning how to pick and doing all this other stuff, I didn't really think that it was, they were transmitting knowledge to me. It was just something that we did and we participated in, or even, berry picking, but that's traditional knowledge and that way of life. And so that's what I do with my kids when we're down south on the reserve. We go out for walks, we identify plants, we look at cactuses, we talk about nature, we listen to it. And it's just stuff that I just love, and that's what really grounds me, and I think is helping to ground them in their indigeneity. Willow went to the native school, Bitoyi school, and I found that, Bitoyi school, it was not a good school. When he transferred to a mainstream school nearby, he was behind in his education. And he was behind in a lot of his social skills because, number one, too, he didn't know how to socialize with people that were not native. And, so he really had to overcome a lot of barriers, and we had to get him, his education level up almost 2 grades, which is ridiculous, and you would think that they would try really hard in our school system to ensure that our native kids are still having the same kind of education as mainstream, but it's just, at that time, it wasn't there. Hopefully it's fixed now, but it wasn't. And so I've made the decision now to, to send my kids to the local school so they have kids neighboring that they can go and, visit with and have friends. But again, when they're doing a subject in class, like around Orange Shirt Day or in June, for Indigenous Heritage Month, my kids are really proud to share, and they're really proud to speak about, my grandmother went to residential school, and the fact that they know that. When I was a kid, I didn't know that. I mean, I don't know if you guys knew that, but I didn't know that my mom went to residential school. And, I can probably say that I'm first generation out, but she never told me anything. And I didn't learn about it until I was in college. And then I came home and I was mad. I was like, why didn't you say anything? But it made sense. It made sense to me, why things were the way that they were afterwards. But, it was just, I wish it was something that was discussed. And now my kids know about that, and they know that this horrible thing happened to our people, and they know the history behind that. And I think that by having all of that, we're raising them now to be stronger people and to be value themselves even more and to be proud. And they are front and center at all of the marches and all of the activities their whole lives, even if they don't want to be. I've always dragged them out and made them told them to participate. But yes, it's definitely helped to shape their identity. But as far as, again, as being, Afro Indigenous, they don't look Afro Indigenous too, because, as I was a child, my mother told me, you have to marry a native person so that your kids will have, native blood. And, and that was stuck in me. So anyway, so all my kids are native, and they look native. And so again, like Mel, when my kids are like, yeah, I'm part Black, nobody believes them. Like I have 2 kids that have wavy hair, kind of curly hair, but other than that, they just think that they're just native kids. And so, they have to deal with all the other stereotypes that go with that. But, I'm just doing my best to try to raise them the best I can. Our local influences around us are just predominantly Indigenous. I've raised them Indigenous just because I didn't really have a lot of access to the Black community here in Calgary. So, and then my father, he lives in Malaysia, so we just have a video thing going on. But yeah, I think you just do your best for you can, your kids, and just I think the more hands-on that you can be, and just as loving as you can be, just creates that culture of pride.
Thank you, Autumn. Samantha, we'll go with you next.
Everything she said. No. So my boys are me, and their dad is Caucasian. So for some reason, my boys are a little bit darker, and all were born with straight hair, and all have had perms in the past 6 years. So, and they've stuck. Their perms just didn't go away. So that was weird. My oldest is much lighter than everybody. People have said that he actually looks Filipino. um, what I have noticed with my kids, and I'm sorry, I'm like this downer, is they try to they make jokes. Have your kids made jokes? They make jokes about who they are. They make jokes, I'm a little black boy or something, and they're dropping the N word. And they're trying to be like the comedy relief of all their friends because they are the token black kid. And it's like, you don't have to be that person. You don't need to entertain anybody. You don't have to be that person. But that is something I've noticed. So I'm navigating this adulting parenting situation. That's what I'm going to call it right now as best as I can. I have 2 teenagers and a 22-year-old. My 22-year-old is very proud of who he is. And where he's from. He talks a lot about being from Texas, but I'm like, homie, you were born right here in Regina, Saskatchewan. You are not from Texas. You've been there once. You do not get to hold on to that. So I don't know. I'm like, and you look more Spanish than anything else a lot of times. So it's hard. I must admit, like it is very hard. My middle son is quite interested in learning his Indigenous side, and he asked me questions, and I'm like, I am still learning. I'm like, there was this thing called assimilation that happened that I didn't get, that just like most Indigenous people didn't. So I don't know the things, so you can learn with me. And he's eager to do so, but he's also wants to be a teenage boy. So what I'm navigating right now in my life with my boys, I'm treading lightly. I'm treading lightly, and I'm learning as much as I can, and they're learning right alongside with me. There is something that I do that I want to say though. It's what I've learned is it's really, really hard to not just say, oh, that person must be racist. I don't know if I'm saying this right or not. My youngest son has been getting bothered by a principal at another school on his way home. And he's finally, like, to me, I'm like, oh my God, what is wrong with this woman? Like, is she just picking on my kid because he's a brown kid? And I hate that is the first thing that's in the front that's on my mind. But he came home and he said it. He's like, Mom, I think she's just doing it because I'm brown. I think she's just doing it because I'm brown. And I can't disagree, right? So he's 12, and it took him until now, and 12 years old. My middle son has experienced this already by getting called the N word, right? My oldest got called the N word when he was in grade 1. So I knew these things were going to happen. It just happened when my son was 12. So teaching my children to is it decipher? Is that the word? To decipher, to figure out if they're being treated kindly or poorly because of the color of their skin, or if people are just jerks. That I'm like I said, I'm almost 50 years old, and I still have a problem with that. I still don't know. I have no idea. Teaching them culture, I teach them as much as I know, right? What they see mommy doing is what they try to do with me. But they've learned things on their own. They've done things on their own, and they're going to continue doing things on their own, just like I did. So I hope that answered something.
It was a good answer. Thank you. So what I do with my children is, as a parent, I've always thought like, okay, how did I feel when I was a certain age, or how did I feel when I was growing up? And so, one of the things when you grow up, and I'm sure we can all agree upon this, is, there's times you look in the mirror and you identify in your heart and soul as Indigenous or whatever you were being raised as, but there's something else about you. You have these other characteristics that pop up, and you're wondering, like, are these characteristics wrong? Like, where did these come from? Because none of my surrounding family around me right now are exhibiting those characteristics. So where does this come from? It's kind of like just a foreign trait that I'm carrying around. Did I learn it from somebody? TV, whatever it is. So I feel like there's always, when you're of mixed culture, there's always a piece of you where there's a question mark. When you think about who you are and how you feel. And I was very fortunate 3 years ago, like, I reconnected with my father from Ghana, and it was a crazy story, like, to find him and all these things. And I must say, like, once I discovered, some key things that I was looking for. What city we came from, what tribe we are, what are our cultural beliefs. I found out history about my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and the lineage, and stories about my dad growing up. And what that does, it helps to complete who you are. Because there was pieces of me that definitely didn't come from my Cree side. But when I couldn't identify where those pieces came from, I kind of felt lost. And so what I do is I think about all these things and how it affects me. And then I translate that into my parenting. So, like, as soon as, I discovered my father and started discovering that heritage and that side of me, it really has completed me as a person. I'm proud to be both, which is very nice. I strongly suggest, like, anybody, to really start to look at your heritage. It's never too late. I didn't find out about my African heritage until I was 38. So, that's pretty crazy. But I never gave up. And so they gave me a name that means brave hearts in their language, because, like, no matter what, I did not stop looking for my dad. And I eventually found him, and, next year I'll go home to my people. And with my daughters, they're so they're Romanian, Cree, and African. And so what I've done with them is I've taken it upon myself to research, like, the Romanian side, the history of Romania, some things about their family, their mother's family. And I tell them about these things, the things that I've learned, and so this is in your bloodline. So, like, for instance, Romanian people were, very stubborn, and, they really were under oppression for 500 years, and some of their traits come from being under oppression and fighting wars and all these things. So I tell my children about that. And, like in 1914, Romanians were, like, one of the strongest warriors. I tell them all these things. And then I was teaching them about our history. So the people that came before us, and the history of Canada and Turtle Island, and about First Nations people, and how to feel strong and proud about who we are. And once I discovered my African side, I was able to teach my children about those things. And so I think what I've decided to do is to help them to identify with every side of themselves. One of my daughters, she just looks pure Native. She doesn't even look white, nothing. She doesn't have really curly hair. It's kind of wavy and just a little bit of curls. And she totally just looks Native, like, through and through. And some of them kind of look, like a little bit lighter skin, but with curly hair. But I want them to be proud of who they are. Not just based on their skin color, but, like, what's in their bloodline. So I really focus on that, and I think doing that for today's youth helps them to understand themselves. Because as adults, we've all experienced times where, we're lost. We didn't know who we were. And I think a part of that is like a lack of cultural connection to certain parts of our bloodline. And so I feel like that is a good thing to do as a parent. And, for Valreen and Autumn, like, it's super cool that you guys like speak your language. Your children are so immersed in that. Like grew up on the reserve and stuff, but I didn't get a chance to learn the language. And one of those things is because my grandmother refused to teach us because she went to residential school. And she suffered abuse for speaking the language. So decided not to teach the next generations. And I have one more question. My admin is telling me to wrap it up, but I'm not going to. So if there is a young Afro Indigenous teen, watching this or has a chance to watch this, what advice would you give them based on your life experiences and based on what you went through in the earlier years of your life? So we'll start with Malreen.
I think I'd start with that whatever hardships they're going to come across, that it's going to pass, and that they should do everything they can to secure themselves in whichever identity they feel they want to be in. I wish I had somebody, because all of us have such similar experiences, but it would have been, nicer to have a little bit more of both sides influenced in my life. I think I'd be a different person. I love my indigeneity and I'm very proud of it. But, there, like you said, Conrad, there's a lot of parts that are always missing. So I think it would be to tell them, do that research on your own. It's okay. Like, you're allowed to figure out who you are and not have people tell you who you are or give you information of what you think you should be. Really just take that and run with it and find what makes you happy. Like, if you feel that this one side or the other works for you, then more power to you. If you want to live your life in a totally different way, do what you want to do. I feel that being somebody that's mixed, we have this like superpower to be adaptable, to be understanding, to be open more than anybody else, because we really can't be prejudiced against anybody else because there's so much within us that it's harmful. And we know what it feels like. So we make sure that is something we start with right away when you meet somebody. Like, traditionally we say, hey, who are you? Where are you from? Who are your parents? Like, that's an Indigenous thing that we always do, but it's always a great way of opening up. And, I'm always like, oh, hi, I'm Elreen. I'm Blackfoot and Creole. And I say it right away. Like, it's not a thing that people don't know about me. So definitely telling youth to just be yourself and figure out what works best for you and learn to love every little bit that makes you, because you're unique and different, and that's okay. And that's better than being basic. So I'm like, enjoy everything that makes you. I think that's what I would tell them. Yeah.
Thank you, Mallory. Autumn?
Okay, now you asked a question, but I had 2 points going back to what was already previously discussed. So one, Samantha, the story with your son. I think the teacher is just being racist. I had a similar experience. I never experienced racism, honestly, until I moved to Canada when I was 16, and I went to high school in Lethbridge, Alberta. So before that, I was a straight A student, and I went there and I took all honors classes. And so when I went to Lethbridge, I said, this is what I want to do. I have goals. I'm going to university. And because we lived on the reserve and I had to be bussed in, it took about an hour and a half on the bus to get to Lethbridge every day. And so the principal, when I was trying to register for school, he wouldn't let me take honors classes. And I was like, well, why? And so I actually had to get the school in the US to send them the equivalency of what it would be of my previous grades to show that I was more advanced than what he was trying to say I was. So when I'm doing this, he says to me, you're really articulate for a young Native woman. And I was like, Well, you're very articulate for a fat, balding white man, but what does that have to do with anything? And so, I mean, that's the thing is, just turning it on them, and standing up for yourself, no matter what, no matter how old this person is, they need to learn that they can't be racist. And, I think by not saying things when things happen, we become complicit in that, and so having those hard conversations and taking those tense moments, it takes a lot of like courage. But, once you've come over that first hurdle and you've done it, man, it feels good to go, I stood up for myself. It feels really good, And then going back to the language thing, like we didn't grow up with our language because like our grandmother didn't teach us. My dad would challenge us every summer to go back and learn words. But she wouldn't teach us. And she would only swear in Blackfoot pretty much most of the time. And so it's been me having to learn. I took it in school and in high school to try to learn. And, I still just have basic Blackfoot, and, it's definitely hard. And so it's something that I struggle with, but I want to, try to teach my kids and try to teach them at least how to pray in our language so that we have that connectivity, to Creator. And so, my message to the youth finally is, I feel like Mel stole what I was writing on my page, which is know who you are and what you like. And so that's what it is. It's, everybody will put this something else on you, a stereotype or something. But if you are firm in knowing and grounded in your being and what you come from and what your values are and what you believe in, then that's what's going to guide you through life. And if there are pieces that are missing, taking those steps to fill in those gaps will only help a person blossom and become the best that they possibly can be. And then, looking at those things and saying, yeah, we're not perfect human beings, and what can I do? And that self-assessment of like, okay, I have anger issues. What can I do for my anger? I have anxiety. What can I do for my anxiety? Or I feel depressed. What can I do for depression? Looking at that and realizing that we all have struggles, we all have problems, but there are ways to overcome that, and to have that courage to reach out and to ask for help, when you are going through those difficult situations. Because, in our communities, I've grown up knowing so many people that I've lost family and friends, to suicide or to others, where they just didn't take those moments, to reach out for a friend. And so that's what I would say is, just don't be afraid. Be who you are.
Thank you, Adam. Samantha?
Oh, Adam, don't worry. I'm dealing with that next week when school starts. I've actually went out to the school to try to catch this lady twice now, but I have missed her. So, no, it's again going back to uncomfortable conversations. You can't pick. This is like now you're messing with mine, right? So, I just need to get him to not. I don't want him to swear at her. I don't want him to be mean. I just want him to look at her and say, "You're not being kind to me. Leave me alone. I don't have to talk to you. I don't have to deal with this, and I don't want to talk to you." So, but having him understand that he doesn't have to deal with those things, that's the hard navigation for me right now. So, that's a conversation that hopefully we'll have this week, and I'll keep you posted on that one because it's going to be handled next week. Um, I actually do. I have a student who she walked into my office and she looks just like me. And I tell you what, I almost cried. I was like, oh, it's me. This is me. And I never saw myself as beautiful growing up. Like it took a very, very long time because you have that idea of like beauty is I want the blonde hair, blue eyed, right? Like that's it. That's what I've always seen my whole entire life. And this girl came in and I'm like, oh my God, you're beautiful, right? I saw so much of myself in her. So what I tell my students and what I tell this in particular girl here, she's from White Bear First Nation here in Saskatchewan. is you are beautiful. You just have to start seeing it in yourself. Don't just see what's on TV. Don't just see what's in all your ads or on your TikToks or anything like that. You're beautiful. You just have to start seeing it in yourself, right? We all have something to give. We all have a reason for being here. The other thing that I tell all of my students is don't get stuck in anger, don't get stuck in hate, because that is such an easy place. It's so easy to get stuck in getting angry at people for treating you a certain way. So, learning your history, there's a lot of anger that comes with it. I have a lot of slavery. I have the residential schools. Like I have that all in my history. And it was very easy for me to get stuck in anger, but it was really hard for me to get out of it. And now that I'm out and I see the world so beautifully, and I see people so beautifully. That's what I want my students to know. Embrace the positives of who you are and where you come from, and be proud of the color of your skin, the beautiful hair, your glorious lips and your round cheeks, right? Like all of it. I try to tell them all. Be proud of where you're from, but don't get angry. I think that was it. What was that? What was that? That question? Was that the question?
So I guess what I would tell the youth, that look like me and go through that Afro Indigenous experiences. At the first sign of racism, my mom always said something and it was very powerful. She said, knock their teeth out. So I'm just joking. I just want to be clear. I don't condone violence. I just felt that it was nice to joke around because I am Cree and we're deadly cheeky. And you know this. So I think, definitely what I tell young kids nowadays is to learn about their culture, and if that means learning about slavery and the things that happened to their parents, that is a part of our culture, because we carry those epigenetics within our bloodline, traumas that happen to our family carries into us. But I think it's important to tell the youth as well, when you talk to your grandparents about the history of your people and about what it was like for them growing up, don't forget to ask about the good things. How loving was your uncle, or how loving, what was the first time you experienced love, and how did you feel about it, or how did you handle adversities? I think that's one thing that we forget sometimes, is to focus on, like, okay, yes, a lot of bad things happen. I learned about, like, my grandmother's residential school experience, but I didn't know to ask about other things until I got way older. And so I think I would tell youth, find out about your culture. What's in your bloodline, the good and the bad, but try to focus on the good. And then from there, whatever stereotype you're seeing on TV that you're hearing from other people, erase that from your mind. Because the little black kid I was in high school, that was me thinking I needed to act a certain way because I was watching rap videos, gangster movies. And I was like, hey, I'm black and that's what I'm supposed to do, because I didn't know anything about my culture. So I just looked at a stereotype and decided to imprint that onto myself. And so for young Indigenous and black youth, I think it's telling them to learn about who you are. And some people say, hey, I don't know. I was like, okay, well, start reading a book about Africa then. If you don't know where your Indigenous culture comes from, I'm sure you might know your Cree or your Blackfoot or your Nakota, right? Okay, find some books and just start reading about them. And eventually, maybe you'll find a family member that will tell you exactly what tribe you come from and what your bloodline is. But in the meantime, you have something to base yourself off of. So, yeah, I think one of the important things to give the youth is helping them to develop their own identity through looking at their bloodline, the good and the bad, And then from there, they can make a choice who they want to be. And that will be the end of our panel discussion. I am so grateful that all of you have chosen to give everybody your time. I know you're very important people. You have lots of things to take care of. The title, once again, is Embracing the Duality, the Black Identity and Mixed Heritage Perspective. I hope that we can do this again.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yes. Thank you, Samantha, Melreen, and Autumn. The next time we do it, I will be much better. And I must tell you, like, you know, for young men, if they ever have any questions about like trying to understand themselves, just let me know, because I can talk to them, because I know what that's about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You guys have a beautiful day.
Thank you so much.
You.
Okay.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
one. Bye.
Thank you.